I really like watercolor. And to be perfectly clear, I really like to look at watercolor because it has this organic, aesthetic look that I don't think any other art medium really can capture. But there is a big problem here. It is that I want to be able to paint those beautiful watercolor paintings, but I haven't really managed it. I have tried, but watercolor has some very big challenges that's holding me back. Because when I look at watercolor, it really has this dreamy vibe, and it can really create mood. And I just love it. I love to look at it. One of the things that make watercolor so amazing to look at is that it has transparent colors that allows the white paper to kind of glow through. But because the color is transparent, that means that it's not opaque. So if you make a mistake, you cannot just paint over it and start again, like you can do with acrylics, for example. That means that you have to live with your mistakes. So like, what am I supposed to do if I do make a mistake? Do I just have to start all over again? And in my experience, yeah, a lot of the time you actually have to start over if you make a huge mistake. So that means that you have to learn to plan ahead. You have to plan ahead where the dark areas are, where the light areas are, and also you have to plan where the white areas are. Because you cannot paint with white watercolor, not really. So if you want to have white in your watercolor artwork, yeah, you just have to leave that space empty on your white paper and just let the white paper be the white. Now there are some like workarounds. If you want some white highlights, you can paint with like white gouache or something, but it won't look as good as just leaving the white paper, at least in my opinion. And there is another pro with watercolor that also can be a con. Like if you wet the paper and paint with a wet brush, the paint will just flow naturally all over the place and it will look beautiful, very aesthetic, very dreamy. But if you don't control it and you have different color that you don't want to mix, those colors might just flow into each other, mix together and create some colors that you don't wish for. It can look very muddy. It can really ruin if you want to have some details. It can sometimes feel kind of random how it turns out. Sometimes it can look great if you just let the paint flow freely, but sometimes it can actually just mess everything up and you can't really paint over and give it another shot. For the most part you only have one shot, one try. Like if you have a more detailed artwork and you let the paint flow freely, it can just flow right over your detailed part and ruin some of your details. And you don't want that. You don't want it to just ruin your detailed face that you worked with for an hour. And I have heard that all the watercolor pros work in a layer. That you first paint one light layer, let it dry, maybe use a hair dryer to dry it, then paint another layer, maybe dry it with a hair dryer and work with layer after layer after layer to get these gradual tones. Maybe that works great, but I am quite impatient, so I cheat a lot and I start to paint before the paper has dried. Now this is a me problem, but I have done that quite a lot, that I think, yeah, it's probably dry now, and I start to paint and I realize, no, it had not dried yet. And it really looks awful if you try to paint a new layer on top of a semi-wet paper. So don't do like me. Please be careful and let the paper dry fully before you start to paint another layer. And one pro tip is to just feel a bit with your fingertip, and if the paper feels a bit cold, it's probably still a bit wet. You can also mix watercolor with different art mediums. I have seen some people use color pencils for some highlights or for some controlled details. And you can use ink for line and wash style. I have seen a lot of people that sketch like buildings and architecture. They can paint the buildings and the landscape with watercolor, and it usually looks beautiful. I wish I could do that. And also some manga artists like Peach Momoko. She uses line and wash, and I love her work. And you can also mix watercolor with gouache. I have mostly used white gouache for some white highlights. And there are some other pros with watercolor. It's very accessible because it's cheap. That's why I started with it, and it lasts forever. I bought my set for like a year ago, and it will probably last for many years. I have painted with watercolor quite a lot during the last year. I am not good at it, but I will keep practicing because I love how it looks. And I really have this goal that I want to make these amazing watercolor art pieces myself. So I will keep on grinding. If you have any tips for an aspiring watercolor artist, please let me know. Thank you for watching.